Palworld is a runaway success with over 8 million copies sold in less than 6 days and reaching the second top spot on the Steam charts. This is a colossal success, but we have to remember that this is early access and there's a lot to criticize in Palworld. So now that we've been able to play the game for a week, it's only fair that we talk about the negative things in the game so that they get improved, changed, or completely removed when the game reaches full release. As of writing this script, PocketPair released their roadmap for Palworld, which is amazing since we often don't see roadmaps even from AAA studios until months after its release. But along with the important server and technical problems they want to solve immediately, they listed my #1 issue in the game: Pal AI while working in a base. From getting stuck on top of roofs or big containers or even mining nodes, to not sticking to the more urgent tasks and refusing to be assigned to a task in the first place, Pal AI is very janky, and improving that will make the core crafting aspect of the game run much smoother. To help with this, I'd like to see PocketPair give us the ability to tell pals which of their capabilities to prioritize. Each pal has a set of tasks that they're good at, and how good they are at those tasks is shown by the number by the icon. But there are some pals that have multiple tasks at multiple rankings, and if they're at a base that has all of those facilities, the pal might do activities that are less urgent than another. Menacing can mine and log at my ore farm. I'd prefer that it focus on mining, but there are a crap ton of trees in the area, and sometimes it'll choose to cut trees instead. So in order to prioritize mining, I'm forced to use dig toys to make sure that the mining gets done. But if they manage to get rid of all of the mining nodes before they respawn, they're just gonna sit there and do nothing. This is why menacing would be better on my base. It could mine until it can't mine, and then it logs until the ore respawns. Maybe a kind of buildable job board would solve this problem. It would list the current tasks that are available to do at the base, and it could be reordered from top to bottom in order of importance. Pals will then look at the board, technically speaking, and then do the tasks that they're capable of doing in the order of importance. Their pathing AI is also a problem, because the area is very uneven, and the pathing in and around a base makes keeping them happy, working, and alive a much harder chore than it should be. We'll see what changes they make to Pal AI and whether it works or not when the time comes. The next problem that lots of other people have had is clipping through the world. I personally haven't had this problem yet, but at the very least I think we can all agree that if world clipping is a widespread problem, it should probably be taken care of sooner rather than later. Now, listen to this. There's battle music when you find yourself in combat, but outside of various musical notes and signals, there's no background music. Now on a personal note, I always turn my BGM to almost muted levels because I prefer the ambient noises of games and how they add to my own immersion in a game. I've spent a lot of time in various zones just looking out at the view, listening to the ambience, and simply enjoying the beauty of Palworld. However, there are moments where the silence is deafening, and having at least some BGM would be good for the game. But for people who can't stand games with little to no BGM, it's going to be really important for PocketPair to implement or find some and put some into the game as soon as they can. Next, let's talk about the building system. Now as I'm writing this, I'm trying to move my current mining setup to another location that has ore and coal in the same location. I spent hours flying around the map trying to find it, and I didn't find it, and then I just ended up looking on YouTube for a location. So now I'm trying to figure out how I want to use this space and whether I want it to be my main base or just a spot for mining ore. I still need to set up a farm, but I need to do that today. Regardless, building is a big part of survival games in general, and Palworld is no different. When I tried to add a roof to a building, it wanted to snap to the foundation instead, so I ended up making a box that pals would just get stuck on top of. Then, in order to move any object that has been built, it needs to be destroyed and rebuilt somewhere else. But when you destroy something, the building materials get put into your inventory, and items in Palworld are very heavy. So depending on the object you destroy, you might get locked in place, unable to move. So then you have to drop some of those items on the ground, put what you have in a box, go back and pick up the rest, and then put them in the box or build your thing. Thankfully, you can just drop the items on the ground and your pals will take the items to the nearest box, most of the time. Basically, moving finished items from one spot to another is a bigger hassle than it should be, and I hope that PocketPair can find a solution that'll allow building to be a more pleasant experience, especially when it comes to actually building buildings. Foundations are obnoxious to place and they're not tall enough to cover very tall gaps. It's also very difficult to align two separate buildings because there's no snapping grid covering the world that would help align them if you wanted to make something like a bridge. It's possible, but it's more of a chore than it ought to be. Now, this is a personal issue for me, but I hope that they add a way to connect the inventories between the 3 bases we're allowed to have. I don't know if this is a technical limitation and they literally can't make this happen or not, but if it's possible, it might be fun to have a structure that we can fill with materials that a flying pal can access and establish a connection with the other bases. Maybe not physically moving the items the way they do within a base location, because that would take an absurdly long amount of time, but maybe just saying that they make the connection and then we can access the inventories the same way that we can within a base when any box has materials in it. Because of the 3 base limitation, the food requirements that all pals have, the way endgame nodes like coal and sulfur are spread out, and the size of some base objects, it might enhance the gameplay experience to forego the realism of having 3 separate inventories between the 3 bases and allow the inventories to be shared for the sake of the player experience, especially when the 3 PAL box locations can each access your entire PAL collection. Maybe the giant storage container can be the specific box that allows base inventories to be connected. It's an endgame item that requires a heavy investment and serves the endgame purpose of holding all of your collected junk over the course of your current playthrough anyway. Then, in the spirit of base inventories, I hope the devs find a way to allow players to assign items to specific boxes, or maybe force pals to prioritize certain boxes for certain materials if they're available. Like if all the containers were on the ground, the pal would put ore into the metal container, ingots into the covered metal container, wood and stone into a metal box, crafted items like cloth and armor into the armoire, blueprints into shelves, and so on. Honestly, it feels kind of like the system only needs a little work to make that happen, but that's of course my professional opinion as a YouTube coconut. The feeding system could probably use a little work too. Removing the timer from completed food items would make them more useful on excursions beyond just planned attempts at the tower bosses and alpha pals. Right now, if you hunted lamballs to extinction and farmed lettuce to make a crap ton of grilled lamball, you might lose more food items than you would actually eat because it would fill you up more and as a result increase the time between meals. Additionally, foods specifically meant for the PAL food tray would be a good idea since there's so many options available right now, and none of them are efficient enough for the tray. Right now, I simply use berries and only occasionally cook some of those berries and put them into the tray. Having more filling foods that don't expire with a shorter cooking time would encourage players to use them instead of berries when feeding their pals. Maybe base-specific foods that increase PAL work speed and minimize sanity drain, like an energy drink or granola bar, stuff you'd find in a break room. Thankfully, Palworld has fantastic gameplay that mostly distracts players like myself from a lot of the early access blemishes that it currently has, and a lot of this is just quality of life changes that I'd like to see become a reality. Hopefully, sooner rather than later, especially after their very successful launch. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. You're welcome.